Welcome to the Spirit-Centered Business Podcast, where we blend the spiritual with the practical for supernatural results. Now, here is your host, Bralynn Newby.
Well, hello there. Welcome to Spirit-Centered Business. I'm here with my friend Peggy, and we're going to be introducing her in just a little bit. I'm so glad that you're here, Peggy. But in the meantime, I have a little bit of housekeeping. You guys, drum roll, please. Quantum Capacity Business Challenge is starting up again in March. So you definitely want to be looking out for that on spiritcenteredbusiness.com. I'm be sending it out into my email. So make sure that you're on my email list or in the Facebook tribe, Spirit-Centered Business Facebook tribe. Make sure you're in there so you can not miss Quantum Capacity, because last time around, after we already started, people were saying, oh, I want to join. I'm like, no, sorry, enrollment is closed. So you don't want to miss it. So all about Quantum Capacity is that we're building the structures in our inner world to be able to hold what God wants to pour in through our business. We have to get rid of the weak stuff that was built on lies and slime and other false beliefs and things like that, and build the strong, solid structures inside that can hold the weight of the responsibility that where God wants to take you in your destiny. So that's what Quantum Capacity is all about. Okay, that is enough. Here we are with Peggy Fava. Thank you so much for being here, Peggy. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Bralynn. It's always a pleasure to see you, and I love what you're doing with Spirit-Centered Business. We go back, so it's so awesome to see how things have developed, and I'm very proud of you. And sorry you're not here local anymore, but we still see each other. We probably see each other as much as we do on Zoom than in person. So.
Yeah, I know. We were in Destiny Women, but you also came to Kingdom Equipping Center, right?
Yeah.
And also, didn't we meet at the upper room too?
Were you there? I mean, we were on a spiritual journey, an awakening, I think, and just learning where we're going into, what, like Chris Carter, the transition areas. I feel that pull. I feel that. And it's been awesome. So
so that would have been like 2014, 15, even into 16 time frame there. That when we met. I know, right? But we were starting to step into the heavenly realms and starting to pull it down in a new and different way, and stepping into this next age of the kingdom at the same time. So you always have a special place in my heart.
Thank you so much.
I just wanted to introduce you to the peeps, because I think that you're doing some really cool stuff in not only through the Bridge Network, but also in your new business. So why don't you tell the story, first of all, your background, and then how you pull in the spiritual stuff?
Yes. All right. So my background, so I am, I started, well, let me just kind of start, and then I'll tell a little bit my background. I formed Bridge Network reluctantly. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. It's kind of like,
I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was, so that's what's interesting, is that sometimes God will lead you, and you're supposed to do it, but you don't want to do it for various reasons. When you have the confidence, maybe you feel like you're lacking, or who am I, the Moses syndrome, etc. Mm-hmm. So, but prior to me forming Bridge Network, I started in 2011, but I was in healthcare for 25 years prior, ranging from hospital setting work, where I worked. I was actually a nursing student. I couldn't quite get into the nursing program, because I was a single mom in a domestic violence situation, and my grades weren't, they were B average. And so it was very competitive. Even today, sadly, nursing programs are very competitive, and they just don't have enough. But nonetheless, I went into the technician side and really prospered pretty well, worked in healthcare setting, OBGYN, labor and delivery, surgery, And then I got pulled into corporate healthcare with medical device company, which is what you guys know as pharma, but it's not a pharma. It's very the same type of business. You have Salesforce, you have research and development, and it was a very, very profitable and one of the top ones, Fortune 500. Got lured into that as well, and prospered there as well. I was very fortunate to prosper in most of my areas of work. But there was some brokenness still within me because I was chasing something that I thought I needed. I was chasing the things of validation of who I was because I came from poverty. I came from early childhood trauma. I came from being a juvenile justice kid. And so I walked away from all of that, trying to recreate this new person. And I said, and I know I got to be careful with how I speak, but I said, I'm never going back there. I'm getting the flock out of here. And I said flock. So, and that was my mindset, is just, kind of like forget who I was. And with that comes identity issues. I wasn't a believer. I was raised Catholic in your traditional Hispanic, patriarch, Catholic kind of environment. So there was two worlds in my mind when I was growing up. I saw the traditional Mexican American Catholic subservient woman. And then I saw the US where it was women's lib and we had freedoms, and they were talking about that back then. So I was somewhat rebellious. I always kind of questioned things, even as a young girl, seeing the hypocrisy of my parents' religion and seeing abuse and alcoholism, and just kind of saying, well, wait a minute, I don't know if I like this God. So I had that foundation, but I didn't really take root in it and having kind of a conflict. But nonetheless, that was my upbringing. Well, I wanted to be, in the success mode. I saw these doctors and I saw these nurses and I saw these sales reps, and they were very accomplished and they came from great schools and backgrounds. So I created that person for me, and I was really not being true to myself. I never acknowledged my background. I was actually very shameful of it. And so I wasn't honoring who I was, and I became who they wanted me to be. So I was good at that because I met their needs, but I wasn't honoring who I was. So fast forward 25 years, I saw the shift in healthcare, and I got into the level of the VP of sales. I was really at that sales operations level. I wasn't the VP, but I was right in the midst of working with all of that and seeing how healthcare was changing and not really buying into it. My sense was, I don't know, this is where I want to be anymore. This is, I would see, and I'll give you an example. There was a product that we would launch, and the products that we had were used in surgical procedures. So I don't want to disclose the company, but they were very, any like cardiac, a pacemaker, fusions on your neck, any of these implants are very, very technical. And we would have 5-year studies where we would pretty much buy off the surgeons, pay for their fellowships, pay for their trips. A lot of, it was legal, everything's legal, but that was the way things were operated. And it just didn't feel right. So we had—
good thing it's not that way anymore, right?
Well, it still is. Yeah, it still is.
I'm totally
Okay.
teasing. It's totally like that. It's even more like that, right?
They've clamped down, to be quite honest, and involved our company. So I had kind of high visibility to see all of that. We had, we invested a lot in this one product. And I remember they, basically, we were saying, we're going to launch, whether these trials are showing some errors or not, they're going to launch, because they had so much invested. And that was like, whoa, we got a flag. And then they do the cleanup afterwards. That's kind of what corporate healthcare runs like. And I think a lot of corporations in general, well, we'll just launch, this is the program, we've already invested, and then if we've got errors, we're going to go ahead and fix it later. And so sadly, I was not enjoying it. And then in the meantime, they paid for me to go to school, finish business, and that was an awesome experience. So there was so much I learned from being in that 25-year period that I transferred into running the nonprofit and doing my own business. But what the key issue that I had found was not being true to myself. And so then I started volunteering as a chaplain, and just I found that sweet spot that was kind of missing from my heart, that I knew I was going to be doing something like this work when I was a troubled youth.
So were you a chaplain in the Catholic faith?
No, it was in the Christian faith.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So you had come into Christianity by that time?
Yes, by 2000 is when I came back.
See.
After I kind of trialed and error with the New Age, science, and everything else. And then having that brokenness, because I had some brokenness, a lot of brokenness, and it was just covered in mask. And really coming to the Jesus moment, like we all had to, right? Mm-hmm. And so getting some healing, but that healing process is a long process. I mean, you can go to therapy and then you say, okay, I'm done. And then another thing happens, as we all know. The trauma recovery walk is a long process. It's a lifelong process. And it doesn't have to be so emotionally draining. However, there is a process. And one of the key things is to surrender to our Lord and Savior. And so I had started volunteering as a chaplain and just, going, and I just knew that I wanted to work with very high risk kids because I was a runaway kid. I was a girl involved in the juvenile justice. So I resonated with that population. And so working with them, I noticed that a lot of the girls, at least 80% of them, had been sex trafficked and nobody was doing anything. And so working in that capacity, I was able to knock on the doors of my chaplain and just say, hey, what are we doing? These girls are victims. And I would have been trafficked, trust me. No doubt in my mind, I would have been exploited. Being a runaway, sleeping in cars of people you don't know, sneaking in their houses, in their bedrooms. I mean, that was classic. But the difference with what I believe, and I truly believe this, and this resonates as a chaplain when I was a chaplain, is I had somebody praying for me. Even when I was on the streets, my mother was Catholic. She lit those candles up and she had her novenas going and she was praying and interceding for me. What I saw as a chaplain with these girls is nobody was praying for these kids. Number one, they kind of saw them as throwaways. They're troublemakers. They can't be controlled. And so, and I resonated with that. That was me. So yeah. I know. And I recall, Bralynn, when I was going, as a youth, when I was probably 13, 14, and they make you go through this mandatory counseling and sitting there and not sharing what was really going on in my world, because I didn't think the person listening would understand. And now back then, like I said, probably 13, 14, 15 age, I had a premonition that I would be doing that work.
Wow.
Later in my life. I didn't know when, but it happened. And so those moments that you go, and I wasn't, like I said, I mean, I believe in God, but I had rejected God too. I was like, you're not around. But he chases after us no matter what. And so going through that process, now, mind you, I was enjoying this kind of work, the social services work, working with these at-risk girls. And my job, my corporate job, it was very, profitable. It was very comfortable. They were shifting us. And so I knew it was time I was going a different direction. And so they eliminated all the California positions. And they said, you move to Memphis or to St. Louis. And my husband at the time was a state worker, and he says, no, I'm going to retire soon. I'm not, no. And I didn't want to go anyway. So I was kind of sick of them, to be quite honest. I was like, I don't like this industry. This is where I want to be, but how do you make money? I had no idea. I'm not a social worker. And so I, took the leap of faith, and God honored it, because I don't know where you can get a 1-year severance package, but I did. So
Wow.
God was, he was in it, and like, oh my God, that's a full year. So I could tout it to my husband. Look, if I leave, then I get this. Look, he goes, well, as long as you make as much as you did. I'm like, okay. So it was very honoring. I'm like, so when we take that leap of faith, he does meet us there. And not to say it wasn't easy. It was definitely challenging, because the next 2 to 3 years, there was no other money coming in. So it was, but God is faithful through it all. And mind you, to mention, not to drag my husband into all of this, but he was going through an addiction recovery with prescription drugs at that same time. So it was a very tumultuous time, but it was the time that I was to do it, because God was closing the door with my corporate work, and I knew the pull, and it's that sweet spot, Bralynn. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
We talk about all the time.
And it's the wilderness, definitely.
Yeah, the wilderness, but also when you know that, no, this is where I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And
right.
God's going to have to make a way. And he did. And despite we have to shift all kinds of things financially, there was a lot of, there was a lot to give up. I did give up quite a bit. You can't spend money like you like to. You can't buy new cars all the time and all that.
Yeah.
But there's that sacrifice, there's a cost, so to speak. And so anyway, so Bridge Network started, and that was the vision, was to really kind of bridge a gap between the faith-based community, service providers, advocacy, which I'm an advocate at heart. If you're familiar with Myers-Briggs, that's it. I'm an advocate. So, and I was advocating for these kids and knocking on doors, and especially the churches. Now, here's what's ironic about the formation of Bridge Network. Originally, we thought it was going to be for faith-based organizations. It turns out that the faith-based community wasn't open. We got blessed with the secular world, and we have found favor. And it was really interesting. I go, wow, that's interesting. And so, and there was probably some dysfunctions. We were able to make some policy changes in how they treated girls that were exploited. Now there's a complete new approach on how they deal with girls like this. And it's, I think, a lot to do with myself and many other agencies, and they were Christians that were in that beginning. We changed the policies, how they handle girls. And there's a trauma court. They do assessments. There's so much better from 10 years ago. And so that is something I reflect on, and I go, wow, we really did make a change. So,
that's awesome. Congratulations.
Yeah, it's amazing to say, yeah, you know what, because we were touting and advocating and say, hey, these girls are victims. We need to look at them differently. Yes, they're acting out because they're traumatized. And so I feel a very, very, very comfortable stating that we were the catalyst for some of the policy changes. And ironically, that is a kind of a mandate that I have, is policy and politics. How that intertwines, it's kind of interesting, but they do intertwine, because I do find myself often working with some legislators or trying to advocate for changes. And so that's still to be discovered. I'm not sure if I'm personally going to be in politics, but I'm definitely involved in hearings when there's when they need to hear from the community leaders about certain aspects of legislation that's involving girls and trafficking or at risk.
So does Bridge Network only help girls, or do they help boys as well?
Yeah, so as we are growing, and this is a principle I think is really important to learn with a business. I come from, my degree is business, business management. And so you've ever taught, you've got 5-year plans and you plan them out, correct? Well, today's world and God's world don't work that way.
Yeah, right.
You have to be able to pivot. You have to be able to switch when you see things are changing. Otherwise, it's going to leave you. And so,
right. Think Blockbuster, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so we had to, we didn't have to, but we shifted because one, we didn't want to do always crisis intervention because that's a very, very hard position. That's a very time intensive. It's very heavy resources. You have to have lots of money coming in to do the kind of, I always talk to whenever there's a panel or a discussion, I say it's really a 5-year term if you want to do recovery for a lot of these girls. And so we knew that we had to go and work with the guys too. And working with the young males is much easier, to be quite honest, than the females. So we incorporated working with them and showing them a different perspective. So yes, we work with females and males from the ages of 7 to 26. We do prevention, intervention, and education. That's kind of the model that we go after because we got to get them young. And we run a youth center in the kind of a not great area. It's very marginalized. It's listed as in the nationally communities as the promise zone that President Obama had labeled that are underserved. And so we are assisting in that community. And these kids, we're adjacent to a park. And you would see kids just out, no supervision, ready to be snatched. So we we opened a youth center. And that fell into our laps too. That was an accident again. So it was like, we weren't, and that was a vision back, a dream actually that I had that, and I didn't know how they were going to relate, but that was a dream that I actually had. And that was something I had to walk forward with. I had dreamt probably about 2-3 years prior to that opportunity coming with the youth center. I had a dream where there was a bunch of computers and there was kids sitting at them, and there was like a community center, and there was music, and the song was by Michael Jackson. It's called Man in the Mirror. And it was a dream that I actually dreamt and woke up and I go, oh, and then now that's exactly how it is where we are. It's that setting. And I again go, wow, Lord, you drop these little things in our heads, in our dreams. And did I do it? Did I follow through in the right direction at all times? No, it's not always that way. It's trial and error, and you keep going. And so the principle of following through and kind of getting out of the boat is probably one of the biggest things I think many new Christians and spirit-led Christian organizations or any businesses, they get out of the boat. You have to have a plan. There's no doubt. You got to have infrastructure. You got to at least plan for it. But you also have to trust the Lord and walk in his direction and knowing when to pivot. So we knew we needed to pivot because prevention was like, we got to do prevention work. We have these kids that are out here loose, and they're no supervision. Their parents can't speak English. They're all working pretty much. And there's gang members selling drugs, and gangs are often involved in sex trafficking. And so they're just sitting there waiting to be taken, or just lured and where they act out, because again, it's the classic youth that get involved in that are typically already have some trauma that they've been dealing with. So we had to go with prevention. That wasn't something I wanted to do. I didn't want to work with that young client, but it's one of those things that was needed. And so I'm really pleased that we are able to pivot, flow where we need to go, and adjust as you need to, because the conditions are changing constantly. The other example in 2020 is a perfect example. We were probably the only youth center that was open for business throughout 2020. We closed,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, we closed for about 4 weeks because we didn't know, like anybody.
Yeah. We didn't know what was going on in March or so of 2020,
exactly.
but then it became pretty clear that it was just a government operation, and I'm not participating.
Yeah. And so exactly, we were just like, okay, something, guys, this is not good. Not to mention the trauma that was going on, the abuses.
Right.
2020, I never saw so many suicides attempts, and suicide, sadly. The isolation. And I just said, I was talking to the staff, and I just said, we gotta be open. We can't be closed. This is what we're here for, is to be, this is our whole point, is being, the county services where we used to go in with the youth detention, they closed all outside services. And it was, it's just so sad, so ridiculous on how.
So let me just frame this up a little bit more. So you're independent, you're not connected to the government, which allowed you to be open, right?
Well, okay. So yes and no. I mean, we get grants we do have government grants, but we are independent. Yes, we were, the only thing they really harassed us about is their policies that they want us to adhere to, which is usually non-discriminatory, which we don't. We accept everybody at any place, and adhere to CDC guidelines. So we said, listen, we are essential workers. And so that's what I told our staff. I said, we're essential workers. We have to be here. I don't care. The schools are not there. So we were doing lunches for all the kids. We were distributing tons of meals. And that's something kind of evolved. We were just starting doing a lot of food distributions and just being open and helping these kids navigate through what they didn't even know was going on. And again, the community that we're based in was pretty much a very poor performing academically location. Right. And so they're getting these Google Chromebooks. They don't know what to do with them. The parents, they can't speak or read English. And so they needed people to help them. So we opened up and we said, we're going to be careful. We had this very tight COVID cleaning methodology, and we sanitize, but we had not one incident of COVID transmission. We've yet to have that. We've been open, and so I know when the Lord says, you open, this is what you're here for. We have to be around. And that's another very proud thing that I felt like, we bucked the system, and a lot of people rolled their eyes. They're like, what? Oh, wow, you guys shouldn't be doing that. It says, no, we're here because we need to be here.
Right.
Especially with all the riots that were going on that summer too.
Right. Yeah. So for reference, this is Sacramento for the audience. So she's talking about, there were riots and stuff. I was not in Sacramento, but I heard about them. But you're independent from the government, but you weren't necessarily faith-based, correct? Or were you faith-based at that time?
Well, our bylaws are not faith-based. However, we embrace it. So when we get a client, we embrace it. We don't hinder we always ask, do you want spiritual support? And if they say yes, we go with it. But I incorporate spiritual principles in everything, all the life skill classes that we do. I mean, we incorporate it quite a bit. It's just not called Christianity, but
That's
you've
awesome.
yeah. So the principles are at work, and they do work. So
That's right.
the truth is truth, right? And so
Right.
you can color code it. You could call it a different type of program, but essentially, and that's what we do. We have curriculum that we have built, and they're usually biblical principles, and we convert it, or we'll take some curriculum that we get trained on, because we get a lot of training with different outside curriculums that are offered to us at no cost, which is so awesome. And then we change it. And so we have, and then if people do not want to have a spiritual encounter, we respect that. But most, especially the ones that have the trauma, they're always open for prayer. So we don't hinder it. We ask permission. And so, and then a lot of times, we have statements around, and they'll see, scripture or something like that. And then they'll catch on that we are believers. And then we have some that just flat out are evangelizing. We don't promote that. We just say, hey, if the Lord's flowing in that direction, then let's go with it. But generally speaking, we're considered secular. But we operate definitely spirit. We are spirit led and centered. There's no doubt about it. There's God's hand is all over it.
Yeah, I know you guys are. That's awesome. So, before we end this first segment, do you have any stories of testimonies of some really cool things that happened with any of your kids that went through the program or that you were associated with?
Oh my gosh. You know what? I have a ton. Well, you know what? I mean, there is some great stories. And let me give you kind of one story. What typically happens is, what I like to do is, we like to help a client, and we do workforce development, and we have them come and they now work for us, and they share their stories, and we empower them. And so we actually have one who's just really, it's a very public story. I don't want to use her all the time, but she's just like really prevalent, is the story with Kiana. And she's a girl that I've known for 10 years who was trafficked and was in prison. And we did a huge campaign to get her out, because she was suicidal while she was in prison, due to some exploitation going on inside. And so now she is with Bridge Network. She is leading facilitation, and she's getting healing, and she's learning. And those are those transformer people that we like to have on our team. People who have the life experience and can share, because really, for people to really grasp a change in their life, especially when you have a lot of the trauma and disbelief, and we know we got to bust those lies, and the belief system that society's telling them, because a lot of our clients are people of color, so they're hearing that white people don't like them. They're hearing these lies, basically, that your people are going to oppress you for just because of the way you look. And so when you can see a person that has gone through the trenches, has gone through what they would say, they've been exploited and used and have no value except for that kind of work, and to see them in a leadership role and facilitating and sharing, hey, I'll use a quote that she said. One of the kids says, hey, they knew her story about her being in prison and going through all that she went through. And she said, I learned a lot in prison. And I think I would not have been where I am now if I didn't go through that. So that is like, wow. you're going to get their attention versus you get a mental health therapist that comes in and tries to help them. It's those people that have the life experiences and they can see that. So then they see themselves in that transformation. They can say, okay, if you can do it, I can do it. And so I love to use real life, disclosing our stories, I share my story. I share, I always say, hey, we're going to disclose who we are, how we got from A to B, because that is what's going to inspire them to change.
That is so good. Awesome. So this was part one, and in part two, we're going to be talking about some of the legislation that you guys have worked on, or you're currently working on, or things you're going into, and then also a new venture that you're starting, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's already started. Yeah. It's been
awesome.
a year now. So.
Okay. So we will talk about that in part two. So you guys, thank you so much for listening, and make sure that you tune in next week to hear the end of Peggy's story. Thank you for subscribing to the YouTube channel, and wherever there's a button to like or share or friend us, or however you can encourage and support us, we so appreciate it. Thank you very much for supporting Spirit-Centered Business financially and sharing with your friends. All right, you guys, until next time, stay Spirit-Centered. Peace out.
Thank you for listening to Spirit-Centered Business with Bralynn Newby. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share with your friends. The next stage of doing business by being spirit-centered is coming together in collaboration, working with spiritual principles, and knowing our destiny. Join our tribe at spiritcenteredbusiness.com, and we'll catch you on the next broadcast. Peace out.